all the jobs I've had now, it's because I was curious about doing the things that job entail. I think a lot of what we're doing with AI is probably positioning ourselves for what job or job description isn't written yet. We all will probably have different job titles in 5 years or 3 years. Like, who knows what that looks like? But I would pick a pet project, right? And I would deliver it well. See how fast you can get at it. And I would even abandon that pet project within the first week and try to do it a different way.
This is Slackers, unscripted business insight from two lifelong builders. Jaime and Jonathan are here to show you how big ideas travel across industries. Consider it your weekly companion on the path to better work and a better way of working.
Now, we have talked about AI on this show before. The worldview stuff, how to think about it, where to aim your energy. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback from those conversations that they've been helpful, especially just kind of getting oriented in a moment that feels like it is moving faster than anyone can keep up with. But we haven't really gotten into the weeds. Like, what does it actually look like when someone who builds things for a living sits down with these tools every day and puts them to work? The real workflow, the shortcuts, the moments where you go, oh my God, that just like completely changed how I work. So today we have got Keegen Knapp with us. Keegen is a senior strategist and a product guy who has been deep in AI tooling as a practitioner, not just a spectator. So Jonathan and I wanted to bring him here into this conversation because we kind of sit on the strategy and operations side more often than not. And we think there's something really valuable about hearing from someone who's literally in the code every day and can translate what they are seeing into something useful for folks who maybe don't write code for a living. So this one's going to be a bit more tactical than our usual episodes. But the tools change every week, man. It is the thinking that is most important, right? So we'll start there. Keegen, it is good to see you, man. Thank you for joining us here on Slackers. Out of the gates, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I've been doing a lot of testing with AI. It started really as things were coming around and, really interested and focused on how might I use AI in projects, right? What are the right use cases? And then it quickly moved to, okay, now I'm building AI products with AI. So looking forward to getting into it. Yeah. So,
I mean, it's incredibly helpful to hear. We, as I mentioned, dance around this topic on the show a lot, and we'll try today to kind of, move back and forth between headspaces. I know you personally have occupied a product strategy role, a business strategy role. So, I mean, you have this wonderful blend of, high altitude thinking and lower altitude kind of application, which is, the sweet spot, I think, for today's chat, at least I hope. So, out of the gates, man, there's a version of this AI conversation that's kind of all about the tools, like what's new, what's hot, all that sort of stuff. But for you, who is actively, building things, what is the lens that you bring to this? Like, how do you actually decide what is worth your time and what's not?
I mean, to be honest, I'm a fast tester. So, right, there's people that I follow that if they say they're trying it or doing it, like I listen, right? There's people that turn my heads, right? We can maybe share some of those links and some people that, who are either in product or they're engineers that pop up and there's big trends, But for the most part, I try fast. But once I get a hold of something and I like a product, I typically use it and go all in on it. One of my big tools right now, and I was kind of trying to convince Jonathan to switch over to it as well, is Cursor. I did start my career out of college as a developer. To be honest, like I was just an average, mediocre developer, right? Like kind of did front end, just like I'm not the best at this. I'm a little bit better at like strategy and marketing and kind of like made a little bit of a pivot in my career, but I did have that in my background about, 2008 or something like that. I spent a year and a half as like a front end developer. So I do feel a little more comfortable than most in like a code editor, which gave me a little bit of a leg up. But if someone does like to work there, I think a really good tool to get going is with Cursor. So, and even if you're not, I would challenge you to try out Cursor or a tool like Cursor. So
I think that's super helpful because I know a lot of people, everybody's heard of the big ones, right? And everybody's dabbled in there and tried, having extended deep dive conversations with whatever your chatbot of choice is. But when you talk about Cursor, like what is it really? Like what makes it different? And like to the point where you'd say like, I think other people should be doing this.
So the reason why I say that is like, so a lot of people think of Cursor and like the main value prop to them is like, it's a code editor. right, that they can have alongside their agent or agents. But even before I was writing code with Cursor, I was doing product strategy or product work and in it with with mostly markdown files, right? So if you can imagine, at the strategy level, I could be doing synthesized competitor intelligence. So I could, in a folder, write a list for each folder gets its own competitor. And then I could be pulling in and looking for information out on the web, like new news about these things. I could be doing, value chain analysis. So even not writing code, there's a lot of ways I can dig into this, but like what I would typically do is like spin up a folder for a project, and I would start subsetting these things out the same way I might do on Google Drive. And then I've got an assistant and I'm just kind of building context over time for this thing and this folder system, which when I moved away from the chat GPTs and those worlds, like I trusted this thing to have context. I was feeding this thing, but in Cursor, I could control the context. I could control adding new things to it. And then the MCPs became really popular, right? Context protocols. And so then all of a sudden I'm attaching more things to it, right? And that really kind of amplified my output. Some of the basic ones at the beginning was like Confluence, Jira, looking Supabase, right? All these things that just allowed me to spin up things so much faster and touch more things. So I think that's my big value prop to Cursor is like, okay, you have a local repository or a local folder on your drive. You can build up all the files you want. You can drag and drop PDFs and images into. You can screenshot things you see on the web or web pages. And you just like have this building block you have that was kind of hard to manage on other services.
As we talked about, and we know that, for folks listening to the show, we know we got people all over the spectrum as far as how far they've leaned into AI, right? Whether they're just learning how to spell AI or they're actually in here creating agents and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things you touched on there that I think, again, some of you are experts at this and some aren't. And I just want to call attention to the fact of like what it means to kind of create a project inside some of these tools. At least through my lens, a lot of times what that does is it gives you some guardrails to put around and be like, I have a container that I'm going to put a bunch of stuff in that all is relatable to what I want to poke at. And it keeps it separate from other projects, so I can have a project about, X and I can have a project about Y and one about Z, and I can go in there and play and they don't contaminate each other unless I really want them to. But the idea is that I can kind of create clear guardrails around some of these things and feed those projects and remove and add information as I see fit, and then query those things and build off those things and do other stuff. So I did want to throw that out there for people here when they hear projects or when they hear some of these things, if they haven't really made it to that step yet. It's a really interesting transition over like this open world of the whole internet and chat GPT or whatever that a lot of people have leaned into of being like, well, I'm going to use this like a super version of Google and it's asking lots of questions and trying to get lots of things, which is fun. A lot of people do that and it's a very useful thing.
Yeah.
But as you want to get into that like creation mode and then you start like, the projects, the files, the queries, the knowledge base, the markdown stuff, the things that you've started talking about become a really important factor of being able to start like really wrenching up your horsepower a little bit, because you're not just querying the universe all the time. You're actually like building these individual brains that you can kind of work with. And, the part you touched on when you lightly touched on the fact of like whether you're using agents or multiple agents or agents talking to agents, and like that gets to like the next level too, where you're starting to use AI to communicate with AI to keep going. I think it'd be helpful maybe if you could touch a little bit on just like, I'm moving from, a GPT type of interaction, and now I'm moving to more of like a local or project based that's, driven around files and knowledge. And now I'm building agents and now I'm building product. Like you're kind of working your way up into this where your horsepower like ratchets up every single time you take one of these steps forward. It'd be interesting if you could frame that up a little bit about how you go from like, yeah, this is interesting to all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I'm actually creating whole applications in hours and days now.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it's interesting, like, so a little pet project I worked on recently, right? So my daughter is a competitive golfer. If you know anything about me, like I spend so much time on this, right? So I've got a little girl who's 10 years old, she competes on the world level for golf, and it's a big hobby for us. We spend a lot of time on it, and it's a blast, right? But, one of the things I built recently, and there's a lot of times where, what I built 6 months ago, the way I built something 6 months ago for like these test projects or something I might want to, whether it's a web app or a mobile app for fun, and the way I'm doing it now is like night and day, especially the efficiencies of it, right? So I have this like little 1-page web app that I built that's like the ideation phase might come from like a GPT, right? Like I might be in OpenAI, I might be in Claude, I might be in Perplexity, or a number of those different things, and the reasons why I might use a different one of those is we could get into that too, but I might ideate there, right? Just on my mobile app or something. And then what I typically do is I would write like a project brief or like what's the best term for this? Like a product vision, depending on how you want to set the scope. Like if you want to define the scope, you might say a product brief, or if you kind of want to leave it open-ended, like for example, if I was selling you guys on like, let's go on this journey and build this thing together, I might sell my product vision, not exactly what I want to build, because I want all of us to like collaborate and build this thing. It's a moving thing going forward, right? So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll start with a product vision. And then what I'm doing now is I start synthesizing what like that executive team would look like. Okay, I want this thing to kind of feel like Class Dojo does, like this interactive piece. So like maybe I have like the X, a synthesize kind of what the ex founder or head of UI UX from Class Dojo, what if I hired one of them away to work on this pet project for me? And then I think through like, what would the best executive team look like? And then I go to like, I kind of build a synthesized like product advisory. So like what I'm doing is I'm asking Claude or Cursor to build me a list of personas into a markdown file that would be my collaborators, basically help me kick this thing off. And then I created the same thing for like a product advisory, like who are my best users, who are my worst users, and maybe one of them is my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter, and I describe her to a T. I kind of build up what I think of as like a team folder. So I kind of have my vision, there's some rules and stuff you can put in place, but for the most part, I start with product vision, who's my team that's going to help me build this? And then I leverage something that's pretty popular right now called like Ralph Loops. There's a lot of content out on it right now, but so there's Gastown, which is like, we will burn all your credits or all your tokens, and it will go and like kind of have a lot of autonomy to go build this thing, where like each one has its own user, and it's kind of an advanced tool, and you could spend, $1,000 a night, something like this. Or a dumbed down version of that, it's Ralph Loops, and that's kind of what I used in the past. And the way I kind of got started with it is I would kind of start with, here's my product vision, here's my personas or my team, and like kind of like how I synthesize that, and each one different. Like there's an engineering team, there's a marketing team, there's an executive team, the product advisory council. That's kind of the way I did it. And then I make a file called like ralphloops.txt, right? And I have all of them kind of write out like their way that they would build this thing. And kind of like I use Ralph Loops as the one file, like the only file that would kind of be the backlog or the things to do or the things to go build. And then I kind of run a prompt with one of the agents inside Cursor and say, look at Ralph Loops, refine the platform based off Ralph Loops. As you finish things, remove from Ralph Loops so that it gets shorter over time. And then review the platform by the product advisory council, executive team, or and add, or the engineering team, or maybe even QA, depending on where you are, and add the list back to Ralph Loops of like the things that they want to fix. And then you just cycle through, right? And it's just kind of using a bunch of context. It's running through. It kind of has some like ability to go off on its own, and like you just kind of like steer the tracks, right? Like each time it does a loop, maybe in the beginning you make a few changes manually, like to like, oh, I don't really want it to do that, I want it to do this, right? And it's picking up on these things as well. And then you refine blah 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 based off Ralph Loops, right? Like you insert yourself in the project a little bit earlier on, and then you're kind of letting it go. And so like that project, like I stood up, and you can kind of see it if you want to, like it's like grindwell.ai. And the thought process there is it's an AI product, right, that like produces like 191 AI lessons that my daughter or girls or boys like her could go do every day, right? So each day it just spits out a new thing. No one has to log in. It's not paid. It's just something like that I could make that would be fun, that like I share with like other parents at tournaments, and they have a lot of fun with it. The whole process there is like the play purpose passion, and it just spits out a different thing for them, like depending on how long they have to practice, or where they are. But the fundamental thing that I do now is like, I'm kind of synthesizing the feedback to the agents. So you're doing a little bit of like agent orchestration. And the really beautiful part is like, once you kind of get going, get enough going, you can synthesize things like executive board meetings. You could have the executive board meeting, have a urgent meeting for a value chain analysis. Like, let's say that you're really great at strategy and you don't want to touch developer and or touch code. It's like, you can do all of that at the higher end and synthesize all the counterparts and then spit out the code in the bottom end, right? So if you're in the code and you want to amplify your output, you can get more business context. Or you could like synthesize the business context, right, and interject yourself in it and have like the conversations there and still do it and output the code as well. So,
dude, that's crazy.
Yeah, I'll throw it back to you in a second, Jamie. But one thing I kind of want to touch on there is like this idea of, being able to kind of assemble a team of your weaknesses. It's one thing that I think some people might not have figured out how to unlock it if you haven't leaned all the way in, right? Like sometimes there might be this perception that, most of the time in our careers here, when a new tool comes out, if it doesn't align with whatever your specialty is, it's not that easy to use, right? Or it's just not something that's for you, right? Like, I don't know how many times I've seen somebody try and use Photoshop for the first time, be like, yeah, this is for me. I was not made for this. This is not something I'm going to sit down and use. Although, of course, that's in evolving as well. But this idea that, and this is what makes these things kind of fun, or maybe even really fun, and to your point, maybe the beautiful part about it, is that if you're a marketing person, you get to add engineers and salespeople and all these, to your virtual team, and go tap those cycles in a way that helps you start to develop those muscles in a way that you really hadn't before. Or if you're an engineer and you've always been able to write code, but you've never been able to build the front end part or design the UI or whatever else it might be, is like, now you get to do that, right? Like, you get to sit down and say like, great, I'm going to go spin up a virtual expert at this thing and start creating things that I typically, or at least historically, wasn't able to do, right? Like, if maybe I write code, but I don't design stuff, now I can. Or I design stuff, but I can't write code, now I can. Or I've never figured out how to use a spreadsheet before, but holy cow, I can build a whole business model now and export it into a spreadsheet that I couldn't have otherwise built in any way possible, right? And that really is one of the, like, and this was maybe part of the drug of this, right? Is you start doing this and you realize, like, you might have had an idea kicking around your head for a while, but you're like, yeah, but I don't have all the pieces. I don't have all the people in order to pull this off. Like, I'd love to build something, some kind of a prototype or a pilot, but it's not really in my wheelhouse. I can't really afford to pay these people, or I don't want to go get fun. Like, there's all these obstacles when you're you have whatever your skill is and you're trying to build something. But these tools are now starting to give you that, like, you just select the team you need and bring your expertise to the table, and it's on, right? You're cooking.
This is sort of a two-parter, so I swear there's a purpose to the question, but we'll start off with asking you, Keegen, to maybe share a little bit about your background that is not technical. I mean, you kind of got an interesting backstory, right, that I don't want to totally give away, but something that has nothing to do with anything we're talking about here today. Like, what's that piece of your backstory, your background?
Yeah, so out of college, I got my first job at an agency being a front-end developer, but all I wanted to do was race bikes. Like, that's all I did. I spent all my time, I was on a local team here and traveled around a bunch. While I was at that agency, I kind of figured out that marketing was kind of my sweet spot, or more strategy and things like that. So I transitioned to that, but got a job because of the people I was racing against were working in the cycling industry. So I've transitioned to the cycling industry. So I spent a year on the global marketing team for Orbea, which is a Basque bicycle manufacturer. And then I took over North American marketing, which means before I had kids, basically I was either racing on the weekend, racing my bike on the weekend, or I was traveling with my bicycle in a suitcase for work, right? All over North America, Canada, and in Europe, right? So I got to do that until we had our first daughter that I was kind of mentioning earlier. And I remember being in New York for Grand Fonda, New York, with my bike in the hotel room. I was there to work the expo and be with our local dealers in the New York metro, but it was just kind of like, man, this is not the dad I want to be. So I went back to agency world, but for the most part, I'm like super competitive. So my dad was a jockey. from New York and was in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Met my mom, who's from Arkansas, and it's just like in my blood to be like super competitive and like raise my kids to be super competitive. Like all of like a lot of our confidence and things we do as a family comes from our love of competing. And I like to share that, and I'm with that like on everything, right? Like I'm very much like a team like player. Like I like to be on teams. Cycling is a team sport, no matter what anybody says. And some of my favorite joys are from before, like when I was able to lead out team members into a race. I race a lot of bikes. I've had a lot of wrecks. Had a lot of fun, working for a global manufacturer. And but yeah, it's a good moment. So.
And just because I know there's...
Yeah, and before you hop back in, Jamie, there's 1 second real quick, because I just have to do this. And I don't like to interrupt, but in this case, I have to do it. Because on one hand, we have Keegen, who's like touring the world, racing bikes, doing all this stuff. And on the other hand, Jamie's touring the world, playing in a band. I just want to let you guys know I'm like super jealous of that, because all I've ever done is just like corporate work, like my whole life. So, I mean, I have good stories, and I've certainly done my things, but those are both like super awesome things that I think a lot of people would dream about. Like, yeah, one day I'd love to tour the world playing in a band, or I'd love to ride my bike all over the planet. And like, it's pretty cool that you guys have done that. I just want to throw that out there. Carry on.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, my wife, in college went to Spain did a semester abroad and got to travel all of Europe. And I was like really, really jealous. And then like right before we got married or right after we got married, I was able to take her to Spain because of work, right? We were able to travel all over. Like our honeymoon was at Kona. We were there for the World Championship Ironman, where we were working with an athlete there. We got to go to this like massive mountain bike race in Mondragon into like the desert of Spain for like this like 2,000 person mountain bike race. And we were both there working it. It was like an Orbea event. So like, it was kind of nice to be like, yeah, you got to do this in college, but like, we're doing it on like the company's dime, like getting to do cool stuff now because of like hard work, really, to be honest,
I just want to call out that Jonathan is being far too generous, because I believe he's pretty much responsible for like Silicon Valley or some Mike Judge project at some point in his life. But I also appreciate the generosity, because I just sold t-shirts, dog. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean Keegan's done cool stuff. I just hung out. I cleaned up. I brushed off the stage for all the snack wrappers. I asked that one because I mean it's a great story, and I appreciate kind of hearing the story be told from your point of view, Keegen, because I want to use it as an example of what maybe we can try here on the show for a second. Because what you took us through in the first several minutes of the show, I think there's people probably listening going like, whoa, I just heard a lot of words that I'm not totally sure I have my head totally like wrapped around. And so let's say the three of us are going to go start a bike company. This is our brainstorming call. And just to be clear, because I know there's religion around biking versus cycling, you're talking about cycling. We're not talking about like motorcycles, right?
We're talking some sort of spandex. Yeah.
So let's say the three of us on this call, we've got our idea, and that's it. You just hit it on the head. We are going to bring to the world the greatest set of spandex that the cycling industry has ever seen. If the three of us had already kind of bought in on this idea, we're going to start a cycling specific spandex company. What is like the first thing you would say, all right, guys, we have to go do this in order to get our workspace up and running with this idea? We've got the idea. What do we actually go do now with this idea to organize ourselves to go now make progress?
To be honest, this one's like the cycling and, any material goods is going to be a lot of competitive intelligence. We probably start the project and be like, what out there in the market, right? So for cycling specifically, there's USA cycling events, there's triathlon events or mountain biking events, right? And there's a lot of data on what brands are at these events, right? What types of things they're doing. So there's a lot of market intelligence that you could synthesize with a project like this. From then it gets into manufacturing, but to be honest, in the cycling brands, a lot of that's just branding. It's like clothing, right? Like there are product differentiators, but a lot of it is the branding, right? So it's current trends, future trends, that market analysis and the branding and market behavior. And then if your go-to-market is D2C, then you got to have a really cool website. Maybe you want to do personalization, right? So you're building a personalization product, right? Depending on what you're doing. But that's the way I would be thinking about it.
Let's go back to that first piece, right? Let's start there because I agreed, right? We're going to go do some competitive analysis. Like the three of us right now, if you were talking through how to go back to our desk right now and giving me and Jonathan marching orders, what would those be? To be like, guys, I think we got to go grab a hold of this tool and create this type of workspace today so we can start to do our competitive analysis. Like, what does that look like? I want to get into like someone's going to hear this and go back to their desk and try something. What are they going to go try?
Yeah. I mean, if they were going to collaborate with the team, right? Like my tool of choice is still Cursor, but you could do it with Claude. But what I would say for us to do is like, let's get a repository. Let's put it on GitHub. The hot take here is the GitHub is the new LinkedIn, but we can touch on that later if we want to. But I would say like, let's start a GitHub repository where we can share in this, where we can store all of our markdown files so that if any of us make any progress, we're all making the progress. We kind of have a shared space, right? But from then, I would kind of synthesize my researchers. I would create a markdown file like this is where we're going to go build. This is our vision. This is our dream. Let's say it's a cycling apparel company that is mostly focused on mountain biking. I'm from Arkansas. Mountain biking is all the rage right now. Thank you, Waltons. We appreciate you and enjoy you. But it's taking off like wildfire, right? And so there's different types of clothing, right? So what I would say is we would probably start looking at pictures of these events and tag them. We would create an agent probably specifically that would go to Instagram, to these event websites and see what clothing companies are sponsoring specific writers and start driving them right there.
Let's start right there. Can we drill into that? Like if you wanted to talk us through how are we going to make an agent that's going to do that specific thing. So you've kind of said we're going to stand up a GitHub environment because we're going to create a place where we can all have a shared knowledge base. You're going to start generating markdown files that capture the vision of this thing. Somewhere nested in that is the assumption that we're using an AI tool to help us ideate and get the idea out of our head into a piece of paper, a digital paper, right? And so now we've all decided we're going to go spin up an agent to go scour and scrape visuals from Instagram. How do we do that?
Essentially what I would do, and I've built a tool like this actually fairly recently that was like kind of there's a company called Crown that's a competitive intelligence tool. And a lot of what they do is they go to competitive sites, they take screenshots and look for maybe pricing changes. They look for new products being released. They look for news mentions, PR mentions, and these kinds of tools. Today, you can mimic a lot of that and build a lot of that within Cursor. So or a tool like Cursor. So for example, I would probably say what the goals of my competitive intelligence is. It's like, well, okay, where are future trends? Who are the brands that are leading the way? What are the new products they're putting out? And maybe I specifically say, these are my goals in my competitive intelligence, right? I would probably write that in a markdown file. And then I would literally go in and I would prompt and say, hey, build me an agent that looks at these every day, these specific websites, these specific competitors, and synthesizes me content based off of where they are and where they're going in the market. And maybe I want to have a front end for that. Maybe I want to see that on an HTML page, maybe a static HTML. What I would do specifically, though, is I would store every day that it spits out a report. I would store that as a file in an output file, right? So there's a competitive intelligence folder. And then each day has a file. So this competitor did XYZ, had 43 mentions on this press site, had updated their website pricing to XYZ, right? So just starting dig into it, and all that's staying inside of my kind of repository or folder on my local computer so that it can give context to other things, right? So that's probably where I would start.
So let's just kind of roll that tape back. I want to make sure kind of capture that, because just that piece alone, I feel like if you're listening to this show and you're going to go back to your desk and do anything, what I think I just heard, so keep me honest here, fellas, is a workflow where Keegen said, hey, you're at the point where you've got an idea, you want to go put a thing into the world. You've decided perhaps as an individual or a group that doing some version of competitive analysis makes sense. You just described a workflow where you create a shared repository to start storing knowledge. You said GitHub, but for the sake of the metaphor, you're saying it's a shared drive. It's something somewhere where I'm going to store data, right? And so I can access it later and or share with other people. and I'm using an AI tool, in this case, you're using Cursor, but through the mechanism of prompting, let's say you're using Claude Code or something similar, you're saying, hey, AI tool, go build me an agent, an entity, a thing that's going to go run a workflow, in this case, every day to go scour and scrape for news and information and updates from N number of competitors that I'm going to identify, generate what that is, save it away in a daily kind of brief of what that is, and do it in the background forever and always as I go forward, so that as we progress in the project, I can just tap that data file at some point, anytime I want to, and just get the most up-to-date snapshot of what's going on. And frankly, I could slice and dice that data however many ways that I want to. But what you just created was the mechanism to go do this in the background on your own without a whole lot of other effort besides what you just decided to go do at your desk. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, the details of that probably look like the reason why GitHub works so well is if you are on Cursor or Claude Code, is GitHub has a integration or a model context protocol to where your agent or the thing you're talking to inside of Cursor can go do things on GitHub, right? It can go build on GitHub. It can push to GitHub. GitHub has a product called Actions that can run code, and it would probably run a code that's an agent that has access to probably like, this can run anytime, it can run at night. It can have access to like an open API key or a Claude API key or something like this, to where it can run and it could use that to synthesize the data. So not only is it grabbing it and pulling an image of it, of those pages that it's seeing or the content off of it, it's also like doing a job, which is probably like a system prompt of go find these things, tell me XYZ, but then the prompt of here's the actual image or the screenshot that I took from a competitor, and synthesizing that back to you into that document as well. So like you could run that job on GitHub Actions, right? So like that's another benefit of like connecting your GitHub and all your content to it to run off of. So like, well, two tools, and you've got a competitive intelligence tool. So
there, we just took it down into the weeds for a few cycles right there.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what we're trying to do here. So now, Jonathan, I'm gonna kind of throw that to you. It's like, let's now go bring it back out of the weeds. Let's zoom out. So as a small team, we just decided a few minutes ago that we're gonna go start an apparel company for cycling. Now we've got this going. What's really the takeaway? If you're part of that leadership team that just knew that you could go do this, what's going on in your head then as you're thinking about the state of the state with the project and like what could come next? I mean, what kind of mindset do you now embrace as part of this Tiger team building this new thing?
Yeah, I think the Tiger team part of it is the interesting piece of that question, right? Because what Keegen just described is essentially saying we're going to go take a whole bunch of information and go put it in a place where not only we can get to it, but all of our AI tools can get to it too. And then we can start making stuff once we have that. And we can ask questions. And asking questions is one of the best things about these kinds of tools, because you build this knowledge and now you get to ask it questions. You know, one of the key things here, I know not everybody has gotten this far, and I'm sure some people's heads are spinning a little bit as, you know, we're trying to figure out who Ralph and Claude are and everything else that we're doing. But the important part of this is you're collecting information. In some ways, you're automating the collection of that information, and you're putting it in a place where you can get to it, your AI tools can get to it, your other, coworkers can get to it, and you can start asking questions, you start building things. And one of the funnest things about this really, and Keegen touched on this earlier in the conversation, is you kind of start building this brain of expertise that's way bigger than you, right? Like it now is starting to collect and store information about things that you can't get your head around because there's so much of it. But you have now the tools to ask questions. So it's almost like, and like I said, Keegen touched on it earlier, but it's almost like you go round up a whole team of experts and you get to sit them down in a room and ask any question you want and start collecting information. And it's a really satisfying part of the journey where you start to say like, okay, we're suddenly dealing with more than the three of us in this scenario. No, right? Like the three of us collectively could not sit in a room and come up with all this stuff on our own. We won't get there. We'll have ideas and we'll have thoughts and all these other things, but we're going to be missing a giant chunk of what we need. And this is always the part that's like the heavy lift. Like we're all going to say like, we're really going to go build this apparel, cycling apparel company. It's weeks and months of strategizing and whiteboarding and everybody digging around and trying to build up some of this information. But, in the past, we'd all hoard all this information to a place and then we would all have to go consume it. right? Like we're like, all right, let me see if I can read all these documents that Keegen put in here and try and wrap my head around that and figure out where I'm going to go with it. And even though there might be a lot of, seemingly complex kind of instructions here, it does kind of boil down to the fact of like, you need to collect enough information and put it in a place that's very accessible so that you can start to create more information. And then you want to create so much information that you couldn't possibly consume it on your own, and you get to start asking questions to learn with stuff. And then the real fun kicks in where you start making things, where you're like, okay, I've asked lots and lots and lots of questions, and I've created a whole bunch of summaries of all this information. I've turned these into other documents and other things that we can use and consume. And now we get to start building. Like, what might this look like? Like, what's the go-to-market plan? Like, what's the pitch? If we got to raise money, what's our pitch deck look like? How do we start framing that up? And like, you start looking at what are all the things we have to do next. And instead of having a whole team of people where everybody has a role, like you get to go make the deck and you get to go build the website and you get to go do this, and everybody scatters and starts doing their job. It's actually way more collaborative than that, because you're all working in the same space, and any person can kick off I'm going to go do the deck's next on the list, I'll go do that, the slide deck, right? Where typically we always had to divide up by expertise, right? Like, all right, Jaime, you're really good at go-to-market, and Keegen, you're really good at product documentation, and so-and-so is really good at UX and UI, and everybody has to divide up all the tasks by their specialty, and then we have to bring it back to the table and put it together. And those things take forever, and it's confusing, and you miscommunicate and all these other things. And what we're talking about here is having this hub of information that only you and your team has access to, and the tools you create have access to, and you could just build and ideate and build and ideate and ask questions and learn things and add more data and more information. And it just grows and grows and grows. And now as you start producing work out of this, it's prompt-based work, right? You can literally say like, okay, take the opinion of this. We're trying to go raise $1 million. I'm trying to take it to this market. I'm trying to do all these things. I need a pitch deck that's going to help get me there. And in minutes, you're now the three of us could be reviewing that and saying, all right, let's start throwing rocks at this thing and making it better. And let's let agents go query this and say, hey, if you were going to put this in front of investor X or company Y, how would they react to seeing this? What are they going to poke holes in? Like, how are they going to critique it? The thing that's so amazing about it is it's like you have this infinite sea of knowledge that you can just ask questions to constantly, and get thoughtful answers that are related to all of the information that you put in there in the first place. And so, yes, the mechanics of doing all that might seem really complicated, because there's like your tools maybe you've never heard of, or maybe you don't know what a markdown file is, or maybe you've never heard of GitHub before. That's fine. These are all just little tools that you can kind of put into the equation. But the idea is that once you have the product vision, and if you're going to collaborate with a few other people to kind of get going on this, it's the scale and speed at which you can operate with everyone who's on the same page and kind of understands the task gets you to a place where you're building and ideating and kind of at light speed, and all the different tool names and all the different stuff, maybe technology bits that you might not be familiar with, it's okay, because you can literally, to Keegan's point, you can pick your chat tool of choice. You go stroll into Gemini or Claude or whatever and say, hey, I got an idea. I'm getting ready to get started. Here's kind of the things I'm good at, the things I'm weak at. Like, what's the best first step? And very often you're on your way. Like, this is how you learn what markdown files are. This is how you learn what GitHub is. It's like eventually like, all right, you need a place to put this. There's 3 places you can pick that are really awesome, that all connect really nice with the first tool that you started with, and away you go. And you can sharpen your pencil as you go. You can swap tools out, and obviously new stuff comes out all the time. But I do want to kind of remind people that, if you do feel like you're kind of in tech overload by some of the terms or platforms or tools you're hearing, it's easy to kind of just take a step back a little bit and just think about what we're doing is all the same stuff we've done before. It's just happening way faster, and you're in extreme control over it, and you have the ability to just start building and creating kind of in real time.
What I really appreciate about that description, and really what I was trying to get at, and thank you, man, for kind of helping us take it there, is let's say you are someone working inside an organization right now, and you're not the head honcho person, whatever, but you are like good at your job. You're trying to, either level up personally or help the organization like level up. And I had somebody ask me this the other day. It was basically like, what would you tell that type of a person? How would you describe the value that they're probably leaving on the table by not leaning in to what is going on right now? If at a minimum, just to understand and try to learn, like, what value are you leaving on the table by not even kind of just getting in the game and jumping in. And I think, and hearing you just describe that, it just reinforced something that when you lay it out like that, what you realize what might actually be the scarce resource is just like being curious in the first place. Because you have so many people that go fast out of the gates with these tools as if their only purpose was to be a shortcut machine. And in many ways, they do provide shortcuts to things, but they don't provide shortcuts if the definition of your shortcut is trying to excuse yourself from doing the hard work of being curious and actually wanting to bring an idea, a product, a service, relieve pain, add joy, provide delight, add pleasure to the world. If you don't have that in the first place, this stuff might not help you. If you're just really trying to look for a shorter path to go, find your way to the candy bar or whatever the thing it is that you're looking for. Because none of what either of you guys described is like outsourcing the desire to want to build things and to just be curious in the first place. You're saying if you have those things, we have architecture right now and toolkits right now to allow you to like amplify your curiosity so that you can compile data sets that will help you make better decisions. None of that to me sounds like the shortcut machine. So I go back to the couch and like push a few buttons and go bloop, 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 bloop. And like my happy life full of riches and everything I wanted falls out the other end without doing any work. At least that's not what I'm hearing. So Keegen, I would kind of throw that question to you. How would you advise somebody who's saying like, I'm good at my job. How do I get started in becoming like Keegen if I don't know how to do that? How do I start?
I say the worst thing you could do is go to your organization and like spit out 20 pages of like crap that's like a pain to read, right? That's like a burden. You're burdening other people because you didn't have the ability to like assess it and read it yourself. Like you do that, you are pushing back your case or the trust for you to leverage these tools. Because not only are you like, you're just making it harder on everybody. But I think there's a couple of different things that I see, like I get exposure to a lot of different companies, and see where they are on their AI maturity curve, as you will. And the biggest thing I would do, like if you're an independent contributor or a leader or whatever it is like do an evaluation on where your company is with its AI fluency, right? Because there is the ability, right, to raise all boats raise the tide, right? Like that whole saying, whatever that is, and figure out where you sit on it. Like how can you catch up with the people around you, or how can you help everyone go together? The company will be better off if everyone's trying to go together than you have 4 or 5 people looking like excellent people, but really not bringing the whole boat with it. So like there is a real big value proposition for being someone who's pushing the fluency for the whole company, whether you understand it or not, because you can be the person pushing fluency and not be the best end user yourself, right? Those two things don't have to be the same. But then I would get into, it's like, there are certain tasks that will always be human tasks, right? And those are, even when I run like my Ralph loops and it does 20 loops of refining this product over time based off of the feedback from the synthesized executive team or product advisory and marketing team, it's still spitting out 10 or 15 like human things that I need to go do well to make sure the product gets refined well. I guess circling back, Jamie, to like your question of like, if you're a contributor and you're not a leader at a company and you're trying to figure out how might I be a better contributor at that company, find out what tools you can use legally, right? So you don't want to be off, solo missioning and putting proprietary content into ChatGPT and at risk, for legal issues. But find out what tools you can use and get some permission there to run. But even if you don't have permission and pick a pet project that has fake data in it that's close to what you do. And you're kind of speaking my language a lot too, because, we talked about my background and like all the jobs I've had now, it's because I was curious about doing the things that job entailed. I think a lot of what we're doing with AI is probably positioning ourselves for what job or job description isn't written yet. We all will probably have different job titles in 5 years or 3 years. Like, who knows what that looks like? But I would pick a pet project, right? And I would deliver it well. See how fast you can get at it. And I would even abandon that pet project within the first week and try to do it a different way. What we're finding now, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but if you started a pet project 6 months ago and maybe it's the exact same pet project, and then turned around and tried to start it again from scratch based off what you learned or the changes in the models, the output is completely different, right? And even in the last month, and not to get into specific models, but like the Sonnet 4.6 is crazy. I mean, it's just so good at like spitting out really, really good quality engineering work, and even like synthesized like user testing, right, is has been really amazing. So that would be my suggestion: is just like pick a pet project, even if it's not with company data, and go deliver the thing, and then maybe try it to do it a different way, right? Don't do it just one way and say, oh, okay, I did this thing. Like, put it down and then try it again. Because I promise every time you try the same thing over and over, or a different thing slightly different, you'll get better at it. So that would be my suggestion.
At the risk of like just totally beating up the cycling or biking metaphor, it does remind me that like you don't learn to ride a bike by like reading a book about riding a bike, right? There are just things in life you have to go do the thing, and you can pick your sports metaphor, you can pick your whatever, but I mean that's the difference between sort of learning and education being done to you,
Yep.
versus being done with you.
Yeah.
And Jonathan and I have touched on this topic on the show before, and I don't want to totally blow up the scope of this chat. In fact, Jonathan, maybe we come back to this in another episode. It just reminds me, again, going back to that high altitude, the power of sunk costs, both in our heads as individuals and as organizations. This notion that like, why we did all these things a certain way in the past, and they brought us this type of success. They brought us to where we are today. What do you mean I can't apply those same things? That kind of rapid ability to just discard the sunk cost, even in a world of AI, I find super fascinating, Keegen, because I could relate intimately. I've got 7 or 8 projects sitting in various, AI tools that, yes, if you put to me as my strategic thought partner, hey, Jaime, knowing what you know now, would you start that thing the same way you did then? The answer is no, of course not, which means I can't have a really deep, intimate relationship, an emotional relationship with the sunk costs of me spending that time. I have to acknowledge that, you know what? I'm kind of glad I learned that, because now I'm able to like move forward. That just seems, to your point about the way our resumes are going to look, like that's the skill set. We mentioned something kind of off mic earlier about companies that are blowing out teams of people. And we've talked about the job disruption before, and there's a version of that story. And maybe you can kind of, expand on that. That isn't necessarily organizations blowing out their rosters, but organizations considering, do I have the right looking roster? Is this the right way? I mean, I just think that's fascinating. I mean, I sort of put that to both you guys. Jonathan, I don't know if you have thoughts on any of that.
One thing I come back to on this, and maybe a little drafting off a little bit about what you guys both just said, is for others who maybe have dabbled in this, is that you get in this mode where you might start a project, and you might take, hear this show, and you're like, I'm gonna go try this stuff, and you start. And you kind of bumble your way through it, and you're bumping into things, and you're kind of finding your way through the dark, and you're stepping on a few landmines here and there, and you're kind of figuring it out. And you might get to a point where you're just like, I don't know that I'm getting where I'm trying to go, right? Like, I might be stuck in the moment of like, this doesn't feel like I'm actually making forward progress here. And there's one of the coolest things about, I think, the tool sets that we have in front of us right now is the ability to get unstuck is really high now. Like the ability to take a thing, we're like, I'm stuck, so I'm going to take this to other tools in my toolbox here and say, hey, I'm stuck. I'm looking at this thing and I'm not sure where I'm at. I'm trying to get here or there. And it's remarkable how the tools can help you get unstuck too, because it's very much like having a sounding board where you can kind of bounce these things off and get some feedback, where you don't have to sit and stare at something feeling like, I feel like every time I touch this thing, it gets worse. And yet there's the way you use the tools can be, in some cases, here's the thing that I think is kind of funny, just a slight tangent. When we're working with our human teammates at work, which is a wild thing to say, it sounds like I didn't imagine, like the youth of my youth version of myself probably think that'd be a pretty cool thing of like, in those moments when you're working with humans, sometimes it can be a little challenging to kind of admit when you're stuck, or admit you don't know something, or be like, yeah, I'm not really good at this. Like sometimes those are hard things to just put on the table. Like some of us are very good at that and some aren't, but there's something kind of liberating about working with some of these tools and being like, you know what? I have no idea how to do this at all. Like I'm trying to do this and I'm stuck and I'm not really sure what a Ralph is or a Claude is, but I've heard good things. And so I'm trying to do this stuff. And it's kind of remarkable how almost all of the I'll use the term top of funnel, but like the top tools, right? The things you start with, the Geminis, the Claudes, pick your thing, where you're going to start. I'm taking step one in the AI land. I'm going to fire up one of these chatbots. I'm going to start talking to it, right? Like the ability to go from that to a very large next step is kind of remarkable. Like you could literally sit down with some of these tools. If you haven't tried it yet, try it, which is think of a thing you're not very good at. I don't know how to use Photoshop. I don't know how to edit a web page. I don't know how to use whatever. I don't know if I'm getting the most out of LinkedIn. Pick your thing, just a thing. And you sit down with one of these tools and you're like, I'm going to kind of start doing this thing. It is amazing how fast you can, not only you learn, but it can help you down that journey, right? Which is like, I'm trying to do, I don't know how to resize an image in Photoshop. Like, how do I do that? You're like, all right, well, you do this, you click this menu, you bring in your photo, you start doing this stuff. Now you're good. How's it look? Well, here's, I'm going to upload the photo. Take a look at it. And he goes, yep, that looks really nice. That's a big improvement over where you were before. And you're like, great. Now I need to do X, Y, and Z with this thing. What tool do I use for that? And like, oh, here's a really great tool. Here's 3 of them. And depending on what you need. And it's kind of like, again, for the curious, it's really exciting, right? Because like you don't have to worry about, I got to tell so and so that I'm not really that good at Photoshop, Jamie. I'm not sure if I'm the person to go try and do this, or I don't know if I can create a poster for this thing, or I don't know if I can create a website, or whatever the thing is. Is it to just sit down and kind of announce that to your chatbot friend that I'm trying to do a thing, and I'm kind of just telling you right up front, I'm maybe not very good at this, so help me down this journey. It's kind of amazing how fast you go from like, I'm going to give this Gemini thing a spin to I've got Ralph loops set up and I'm using Claude code and I've got a GitHub now, right? Like some people might, if you're listening to this and all those things sound like complete gibberish, but you're willing to try step one, you might be sitting here like a week from now being like bragging about your Ralph loops, to your friend Keegan. And it's really surprising how fast you get from I've heard of Gemini or Claude to I have a GitHub now and I'm using Ralph loops and I've created agents. Like if you are sitting there thinking like, this seems like kind of a stretch from where my current knowledge base is to what you guys are talking about, the amazing thing, and probably this thing I would say is a key takeaway from this is anybody with some curiosity and some intent can actually do all the stuff we're talking about. If you're willing to take that first step and just start putting things in and start exploring an idea or a vision, just being really transparent with what you don't know and what you're trying to do, it will guide you down your path. It may not be the ultimate solution. To your point, Jamie, you might build a little bit of a house of cards doing that, but once you get there, you'll be like, oh, okay, this is a good stopping point. I'm actually going to start over, which sounds crazy to some of us who've been like, yeah, I've been working on this giant thing for a really long time. I'm just going to throw it away. I'm going to stop and I'm going to just start over. But in a world of these tools, starting over can be a really fresh way to do something because you built knowledge, right? So you still have the knowledge of whatever got you there, but now you can course correct. You'd be like, that wasn't the way. But I have all this stuff that I've produced, all this knowledge I've acquired, and I now have ability to maybe hit the reset button and be right back where I was, but in a much better place in hours or days or whatever it is. But this isn't like before we were like, well, I've got to scrap all that hybrid code that I built for these mobile apps, and I'm going to rebuild it all in like React Native now. It's going to take me 6 to 9 months or whatever. Like it's not that, right? Like it's not that, even though it might feel that way. So I do encourage folks is like, for some of you, you might be like, yeah, this all sounds great. I've heard of Ralph loops. I haven't tried them, whatever. Cool. But if everything sounds like gibberish to you and you're just like, sounds cool, but this sounds hard and I don't think I'm cut for this, even though I am curious, I would say if you're curious enough to pick one tool to start with, you can get very, very far to the point where you start getting comfortable with exactly the things that Keegan's been talking about here.
Yeah, I think, and if we were talking, I remember seeing something a year or so ago, and let me know if this resonates with you, is that there was different tools depending on how technical you were, right? Like maybe you use Bolt or Make or Lovable, right? If you were just like, oh, I want to make this thing, and it spits out the whole thing, spits out the back end. All of a sudden, those things started connecting to a back-end surface called Supabase, which is actually really easy to get going with, even if you're not a technical person, right? And I think they're like $5 per like project instance. So it's like a real cheap, easy way to get going, right? But I would say, if you've been using like a ChatGPT or a Perplexity or a Gemini and just chatting back and forth for a long time, I would challenge anybody to move to somewhere where you can manage the context better, right? Like I think that that is 100% the next step, right? And whether you're doing that inside of a Claude code or a cursor, or what's the Gemini's workspace, whatever they have, like their notebook LLM, whatever it is, move to somewhere where you can control the context a little bit better, right? My tool of choice is Cursor because I love Cursor because I can choose the model from whatever provider I want, right? So if I want a lightweight Gemini, like for example, Gemini is really great at reading long PDFs, right? And deciphering them. Claude, whatever it is, like the models just do different things. And I like having Cursor as kind of somewhat a agnostic tool that I can plug and play whatever model I want, right? And I just pay Cursor, right? I could just pay Claude and like go through them, but just I would challenge you to move to something where you can manage the context better. And then I would challenge you to like, okay, what will it look like if I'm sharing these files somewhere where other people can be collaborating with me, right? Because I do think that there's still a lot of buzz and momentum that can happen with sharing a project and being able to kind of version control it with other people. And it kind of opens up the idea of releasing to the public if you put it somewhere like GitHub, right? This thing can be produced, right? It can, all of a sudden you have it on GitHub, then you can deploy really easily to like a Vercel, right? Where you don't have to be very technical, to deploy to Vercel. So if you have a front end to your project or the thing that you've been building with GitHub, all of a sudden, you can deploy somewhere, right? So like you're starting to open up those pipelines. It's like, okay, I have this thing, I can manage the context. It's a folder. Oh, I have this thing, I could share it to GitHub for my storage and versioning control and share this project with other people. I think the other piece here too is, and we kind of touched on it for just a second, is I truly believe, for me personally, is that my GitHub that I'm kind of building and working on, where I put some public projects or a lot of them being private still, is going to serve me a better person as a strategy product person than my LinkedIn page does, right? Because those are actual projects that I'm working on and talking about AI, building, development, growth, and these kinds of things, right? Like that will be the proof in the pudding. I've spent a lot of time kind of starting to curate that space, right, to develop a resume. But all that to say is like, it just kind of opens up to the next step. And I think that's a really good maturation to go through. So, and then the other thing too is like you touched on like not being too attached to something like, oh, I got 2 months down the road, it's not really working how I wanted it to. It's like, I would start all over, right? Just like because you can develop so fast, right? Like the idea of like, and you're developing with plain English, right? So pull all the context that matters to you out of it, and then start your new project with the good stuff, and then start from scratch. So
I love what you said there at the end about kind of the value of your LinkedIn versus your GitHub. And I think, maybe getting close to that realm of takeaways from this conversation, that's certainly one that's been in my head the entire time you've been talking, which is one of the artifacts of the technology being where it is today is just how blatantly it exposes let's just stick with the workplace, but you can extend that to other areas, how much it exposes people or teams who are kind of happy to show up and just receive the set of instructions for that day. And just tell me what to do, boss. I'm gonna go do that. And that was work. And many times you ended up in those seats because you had a resume, or perhaps you had a degree, you had a certification, you had a thing that sort of signaled to the world, I have done these things, and that comes with some version of sort of status and or affiliation that has some marketplace value, so therefore I get to be a part of this team, where really what I'm happy to do is just sort of show up and, oh good, there's new instructions on my desk today, I'll go do that for a few hours, then I'll go home. Where now, oh my gosh, all it does, these tools now, expose your ability to create versus your ability to not do that. And I find myself having that kind of conversation constantly because I work with a lot of people who consider themselves artists, people who are working in artistic lanes, and they wrestle with this concept of like, how do these tools do anything other than just gut my identity of who I am at my core, because I consider myself to be an artist or a creative. And I always push back with that notion of, well, are you an artist with a capital A or a lowercase a? Are you the noun or are you the verb? Like, what are you more interested in being? And the GitHub, hearing you say that, I love hearing that, because what we're really saying is, show me the work. Yeah, I see the resume, but like, what have you done? What have you made? What risks have you taken? What have you shipped that frankly just might not work? And by the way, I would say that at its core is kind of the definition of art, is bringing something, an idea, a concept, a thing into the world that just might not work. People might bump into it and be like, man, that sucks. Yeah, that's how that goes. That song you played, I hate it. Yeah, that's how that goes. So do you go back and stop making songs? I don't know. Like, those are deeper questions, but I think exactly what you just said for me is the enormous takeaway. Our body of work, our ability to create is undoubtedly going to be the filter that many future hiring organizations, among many other characters, are going to look through when they start making decisions. Or at least I would place good money on that bet if I'm in a casino, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think, like, we talked about tools and we talked about how easy it is for a lot of people to be racing towards similar solutions, right? So in my mind, the artists, the creatives will be a winner here because the need for differentiation will be increased, right? So there will be a lot of apps and a lot of things that, like, for example, like I know for a fact that like Tailwind or React is like all of the, like, there's just so many, they want to code that way. Like they want to code in React and Tailwind. Like, so a lot of these apps that we spin up, we're like, oh, that's probably, a lot of vibe coded stuff or however you want to call it, right? Like, if you want to be down or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? And maybe we're like, it solves the way it solves the solution is creative. But to be honest, like, there is going to be this big drive for differentiating user experience, right? The creative ways that you're solving problems. So, that to be honest, that's not really me. Like, I'm kind of a thinker, but if I was trying to be different in the market today, I would be trying to bring in strategic thinkers and creative thinkers, that produce, and that would be my dream team. So.
That's a really awesome point, for one. I think the one thing I don't recommend people do is go to Gemini or Claude or whatever and go in and say, hey, what company should I start to make $1 zillion today? And then just do whatever it says, right? Like, that's not the way. And, to your point, Jamie, there is not, this isn't the shortcut to, like, I'm just going to stop working now because I can push a button and write a sentence, right? Like, that is not what we're saying here. But the point of being able to bring an idea to the table that you care about, that solves a problem that you have, that you're uniquely informed to start, contributing to, is one, it's really satisfying because you get to ideate immediately. You get to start teasing out an idea. You might have been kicking around an idea for decades in your head and be like, wouldn't it be cool if, like, somebody would ever fix this problem and nobody has? And then you sit down and start trying to fix it. That's bringing your creative brain to a problem that is unique, right? Nobody has solved that problem in 20 years. So yeah, someone might be banging somewhere at a keyboard today trying to do it, but nobody has yet. And you do have a unique position on it to get started. And so, those creative ideas are the seeds of all of this stuff, right? Like, we are not yet to the point, and who knows, we may get there. Superintelligence may arrive and it just spits out hey, Jamie, just out of nowhere, we decided to give you this idea that's going to go give you the ability to make $1 billion because of your unique skill set. And we're just going to hand it to you. You just push this button and then just head to the bank and pick up your money, right? Like, we're not there yet. But this idea of the creatives feeling somehow marginalized by these tools, to Keegan's point, it's kind of the opposite. This is like the greatest thing a creative could ever ask for, is like, we're going to give you a place to bring your ideas and thoughts and concepts and stuff, and you get to immediately start making progress. You get to immediately start making forward progress, where until now, everyone who's had those kinds of ideas, it's probably trapped in a notebook somewhere, or it's still in your head, or maybe you shared it with one of your buddies 10 years ago and nothing ever happened. It's like, dust those off, bring them to the AI party, because that's what the AI party needs, right? We need the creatives to show up with these awesome ideas because they're not being hampered by the ability that they can't write code, or that they can't use Photoshop, or that they can't do X, Y, and Z, or they've never launched a product before. Pick your thing. We all have our reasons why we maybe didn't take the next step because of that. But we've now been given the tool that says everybody with some kind of an idea, some kind of a vision, some kind of a plan, you now have a way to take step one right now and start making progress. And that has not been the case until we've seen some of these tools arrive.
I love it, man. It reminds me so much of what I value in these conversations when we get to kind of zigzag between art and engineering and strategy and operations, which is, at least in my brain, you get to a point eventually of like, what is all of this for? Because maybe we do end up in that place where there's an easy button and the cash just shows up in the bank account and we float around in the chairs like it's Wally and we drink Slurpees and we don't do like, is that the point? Like, is that what we're chasing? I mean, and I'm not, again, I'm not trying to just go meta to that level on purpose, but it is worth acknowledging that what we all have in front of us is an opportunity to just level up ourselves and the things around us if we want to. And we have a little blip of time here on this rock for as long as we are until it all goes poof. And who knows, that might be sooner than later. Who knows? But we all have that opportunity. And that kind of artist mindset coupled with this technology and the ability to be curious and want to explore and learn and make, I love, because I had someone tell me the other day, and it just was like a light bulb for me. And you know, we have kids, just to remember how if you walked into like a kindergarten classroom, any of your kids are in kindergarten, right? And you walk in and you ask a group of kindergartners, like, raise your hand if you're an artist. Like, they'll all raise their hand. They'll all raise their hand. Go do it in a middle school classroom. Go do it to a bunch of 7th graders. Who here's an artist? There's a couple kids, maybe. Go do it. My daughter's a senior in high school. Go to the seniors back. Who here's an artist? There's one kid who's like, I draw. Like, what happened? What happened? We trained it out of ourselves. And so that's what I love in these conversations. Hopefully, if you're on the other end listening, remind yourself it's in there in you somewhere. And the world around us, for a lot of reasons, trained it out of us for a whole bunch of different reasons. And you might just be sitting on a powder keg that could seriously just blow all that stuff up and bring it out of you if you want to go there. And I think, interestingly enough, that's often what we find ourselves lobbying about on this show. But Keegen, I kind of want to leave it, with you to kind of close us out here. Like, what's on the horizon? What's next? What's something that you are personally looking at going like, oh, that might be the next thing that's like coming? What has you kind of like buzzing?
Yeah, I mean, the big talk now is like your Claude bots or your personal assistant bots, right? The AI.com that was sold and did the Super Bowl ad, right? That's leveraging a lot of things that are being capable with the Sonnet 4.6s and the new models that are coming out, right? So I think we're all about to see our personal operating systems, right? Where we have at least an agent or multi-agents that has context into all the things we touch, and it's just around us that we can interact with and go do jobs for us. We're going to have specifically human tasks and agent tasks. Like, that is our future. It is coming fast, right? A lot of the people on the forefront are setting that up. There's like the massive spree of people that are buying their Mac minis or using their old MacBook Pros to set those up, and slowly giving it more access to their life, right? So that this thing can do more jobs for me, more jobs to be done. And just me, I'm being very conservative about it. Some people are being very aggressive about it, but for the most part, and you can even, a test there might be like, you can like provision, on like Kilo, Kilo, and test like Claudebot and set it up and start doing some tests there. But that's a lot of like the next things, to go back to the artist thing, and maybe this is like the driving home the pieces, right before we started coding, we started the recording, you guys were talking about, working on your personal projects and being able to get fed from it. And, artists, I know for a fact there's like, have you ever heard this, like there's certain things that give you spoons and certain things that take away spoons, right? Like, I was working on an ADA project, like for a software company, and it was like dealing with people like on the spectrum, and they're taught this at a young age that like, hey, you have 13 spoons a day, right? So there's certain things that take away spoons and there's certain things that give you spoons. And so like a lot of the purpose behind like the discovery and creation and these new tools are things that give me spoons, right? Helping other people and doing things give me spoons. So this has become an outlet for like, if certain stressful conversations at work take away spoons, or having to discipline my kids take away spoons, but getting to invest in my kids, getting to build new things, like, are giving me spoons. So at the end of the day, I'm kind of balancing acting my spoons, right? So this is just another mechanism really for me to just give me spoons, right? So that I end my days even, right? So that's kind of my takeaway. So
I think Jamie, that's the show. Everybody go get your spoons.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Keegen, Thank you so much for being here with us. For people that want to learn more about you or your work, or just connect and say hi, like, where can they find you online? What's the best place for someone to find you?
yeah, I kind of beat this home, right? Like I used to say LinkedIn, but now it's got to be GitHub. So yeah, find me on GitHub for just GitHub/Keegen, github.com/Keegen. Follow me. Like, let's collaborate on a project. Really, like, to be honest, like, all I want to do is build with people fun things right now, right? And we can do this so fast, right? So even if it's like just like this little plugin for competitive intelligence or synthesizing executive boards or building a website so people can like do a valuation chain on or value chain analysis on an idea they have, like I'm in.
I love it. I love it. Well, I got to ask you one more because you mentioned what you'd built for your daughter in the golf training.
Yeah.
If we got any golfers out there, what was that one?
So it's grindwheel so grind GRIND, like, because golfers are always out there grinding, WELL.ai. And it's a fun project. It's probably one of those things that will always be growing features on it because you got to get my spoons. But yeah, it's a good pet project, and it's one of those things. It's like, I think it costs me like $3 or $4 a day to like run 190 prompts to give all the different variations of sessions that a golfer might want. So
that's amazing. Well, dude, thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
Whoa. Okay. So that's a wrap on the conversation with Keegen. That was crazy. I mean, I love hearing that kind of stuff, but I have to acknowledge, I am going to assume that plenty of folks who might tune into this are going to come away going, what the heck was that? Like, what just happened? Not in a bad way, but because we went to some places that, like, I'm glad we were able to get to, because just to hear his energy and passion for how much you can do with the tools that we have at our fingertips right now. I mean, it's equal parts inspiring and sort of intimidating, because you're going, I don't think I have the vocabulary here to start, even exploring what I'm supposed to do next. But dude, that was a lot of fun. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, it was great. And I think this will be one of those shows, I think from an audience perspective, for those of you listening, you could easily re-listen to this show in a couple weeks and unlock new things that maybe didn't make sense the first time you heard it, or that you hadn't tried yet, or maybe you weren't quite ready for. And it kind of prepares you for that in a way that says, like, okay, like, I think I get the underlying principles of all this stuff, but maybe I haven't heard of a lot of these things or I haven't tried them yet. But there's also kind of a prescriptive way to get started there. Like I kind of jokingly say this, but if you just learned how to spell AI this week, there's something for you in what we just talked about. And if you've got agents running and you've got Claudes and Geminis and whatever already happening, there's still stuff to take from that show to push yourself forward. And I hope everybody was able to take that away. If it felt overwhelming, look for the parts that said, everybody can do this. Everybody can take this step forward. That's really, really important as a way to say, if you can just get started, the tools are actually kind of designed to help keep you going. And if it feels intimidating at first, there's a lot of comfort in saying, like, I can start real easy here and just start exploring. And as my curiosity builds and as my interest builds and as everything kind of keeps going, all of a sudden, more of the stuff that Keegen was talking about really starts making sense. And so I think as you try it, and I encourage you to try it, and whether you're on step 1 or step 10 or step N, do +1. Take one more step with some stuff you heard today and try it. And if you find yourself down the rabbit hole a little bit and you're starting to wonder, like, what's next, maybe give the show another listen and find some of those parts where Keegen was talking about, where you say, like, oh, I kind of get that now. I kind of get like a project, and I kind of get what it means to build agents, and I kind of get what it means to build knowledge and share things with other people and collaborate and stuff. And I can't overemphasize enough how exciting all of this is. That when you start to play, the excitement that builds, and it's invigorating and it's challenging. And I kind of even joke with people, like, I feel like I'm taking limitless pills sometimes when I get in here and start playing with these tools, because I feel like my brain's just totally unlocked, and I get to run, and it's really satisfying. So yes, go get your spoons, take a step forward and try some of this stuff. It's totally worth it.
Dude, I love it. Here's the homework assignment. Put a bow on it in the spirit of everything we just went through. If you made it this far, go download the transcript for this episode. Go feed it into an AI tool that you use. Present it with a prompt that says, I know nothing about this subject matter, but I'm interested in these things. What are the first 3 to 5 things I should think about doing next? Go do that. Watch what happens. It's going to be friggin' crazy. Man, Jonathan, it's always good to see you. Thank you so much for the chat today and your time. I'm Jaime.
I'm Jonathan.
This has been Slackers. Thank you so much for being on the other end. We're glad you're here. Again, check the show notes. Lots of links there. Keegan's work, our work. We can't wait to talk to you soon. Thank you for being here, truly. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.